had no lung disease, even though they were living in smoke all day long. Dr. Price went to Alaska into the hinterlands where he found superb examples of human form, and he often talked about, he would say, superb physical specimens, beautiful broad faces. He described her teeth as 2 rows of pearls. You can see the very wonderful facial structure. The babies were very sturdy and strong. They were alert, curious. They were very serious. Stared at him. You see how this baby is staring. But they never cried. He never heard crying babies in these traditional cultures. Here is another set of photographs. Dr. Price, by the way, took all these photographs. Many of these Eskimos had missing teeth or worn down teeth because they chewed on leather to make their clothes, and the leather, they had sand and grit. But even these worn down teeth, just almost worn down to the pulp, were not decayed. He found virtually no tooth decay among the primitive Eskimos. And he met a doctor who had spent 30 years in Alaska, and this doctor told him that he had never seen cancer, heart disease, any condition requiring an operation among the primitive Eskimos eating their traditional food. And he said the women gave birth so easily that it was impossible to get to a birth of an Eskimo woman. If they called the doctor, by the time he got there, she'd already had her baby. Very often the women gave birth at night when their husbands were asleep, and when the husband woke up the next morning, she would introduce him to the new baby. This was in sharp contrast to the situation in the towns where they were eating the white man's food, which was being brought in. The first thing that happened was rampant tooth decay. And here's the thing, the foods that caused the tooth decay had arrived in these villages, but the dentists hadn't gotten there yet. So there was tremendous pain from this tooth decay, and they became prone to suicide. And the reason given for suicide was the pain of tooth decay. But it was the next generation that gave Dr. Price the most cause for concern, because the children who were born after the parents changed their diet had dental deformities. There was not enough room in the jaw for the teeth to come in straight. So all of a sudden you're seeing dental deformities in a population that had none before. So this is not a genetic problem. This is a nutritional problem. And he noted in every culture that those who had dental deformities were more susceptible to other types of diseases. So going back to the healthy traditional Eskimo, we want to ask what kind of diet did they eat? The number one source of calories in this diet was animal fat, and this is not fish oil, but seal oil. So this is the fat of a mammal, which they're carrying here actually in the stomach of the seal. They used the seal oil for cooking, they used it for food storage, they used it for a dip or a dressing for their food, and they also had a special dish where they whipped up the ice cream, the seal oil till it was frothy, added a few berries, and that was the Eskimo ice cream for special occasions. Naturally, they ate a lot of game, both sea mammals and land mammals, and they did have one food combining rule, and that was that they never ate lean meat. And we find this actually all over the world. We found Stefansson, who lived with the Indians in Canada, said the same thing. They hunted the animals selectively. They wanted older, fat animals so they could get the fat. And when the hunting was good, they actually threw the lean meat away. What they saved of the lean meat was cut into strips and dried and smoked, and then when they went to eat it, they spread it with the fat. They also ate the fatty organs first, the brain, the marrow, the liver, and the tongue. So there was a tremendous emphasis put on the fat of the animal. They had a lot of fish in the diet, and the way they prepared the fish is most interesting. Very often they would throw the fish into a hole in the ground and cover it with earth or grass and allow the fish to ferment until it became sort of the consistency of ice cream. This is how they got their calcium, because they were eating the fermented fish bones. The reason they ate fermented foods was they noted that if they gave fresh fish to their dogs, the dogs could not pull the sleds all day long. But if they gave the dogs fermented fish, then the dogs had the stamina and strength to pull their sleds all day long. So they were great observers of nature. And they realized that if they ate this semi-rotten fish, that they too would have strength and stamina. And this is another thing we're going to find all over the world, the use of fermented foods to give you strength and stamina. We'll talk about why. So very, very few plant foods in this diet. About 80% of calories came from fat, and so it was a diet based on game and fish. The sacred food among the Eskimos was salmon roe, salmon fish, salmon eggs. And when they asked them why they went to such trouble to dry these salmon eggs, they're drying in the sun here, they said, we need these salmon eggs so we can have healthy babies. And it's quite amazing how much of the fish eggs that they ate. If you hear Honora Jones on Sunday, she gives a very interesting presentation on the Eskimo foods. Dr. Price spent a lot of time among Native Americans. The chapter in his book on Native Americans is fascinating. Now, these are not his photographs. These are famous photographs of a Navajo youth and Chief Sitting Bull, and you can see the beautiful facial structure. The truly primitive Native Americans were very tall. The natives of Texas were described as averaging over 7 feet tall. Very hardy. Texas Indians never wore clothes, even in the winter, and their favorite activity on a winter morning was to break the ice in a pond and all go swimming, without any clothes on, of course. Remember that the Native Americans did not have the horse until the white man arrived. They hunted on foot, and they could outrun a deer. So strong and fleet they were. These are photographs of Dr. Price of Native Americans living in Canada. You can see the uniformly good dental structure, a virtual absence of tooth decay, and he did not find any signs of any kind of disease or illness among these people. And they lived almost exclusively on animal foods, and they had the same food combining rule. They never ate lean meat. And what they mostly wanted from the animals that they killed was the organ meats and the fat. And this was the tragic contrast between the modernized Indians living on reservations, eating the handout commodity foods. They suffered from tremendous tooth decay, and then in the next generation, you had the narrowing of the face. They were shorter. They tended to be overweight and much more susceptible to disease. And Native Americans are particularly susceptible to diabetes because they have this very slow metabolism that allowed them to prevail in very difficult conditions, go a long time without food if they didn't have it. But if they're on the modern diet, that makes them very susceptible to diabetes. These are Seminole Indians living in the Florida Everglades. Dr. Price was there before the land rush, the real estate boom. And once again, you can see this beautiful facial structure. These look like princes and princesses, very noble looking faces. And this is the normal facial structure of human beings. This is the way that everyone is supposed to look. This is what our genetics provides for. But whether or not our bodies are built to express that, to have that full expression of the genetics, depends on the building materials. That is the diet. And here we have, if we go back, let's see, to our Indian princess here, beautiful broad face. This woman is from the same tribe, so this is the same genetics, but her parents were eating processed food, and she grew up on processed food. So you see the narrowing of the face, the crowding of the teeth. And the teeth tell the tale, because if this were just a matter of having crooked teeth, well, we just take our kids, why bother? Why not just eat junk food? We just take our kids to the orthodontist and straighten the teeth, right? But the teeth are the visible sign of the entire structure of the body. And when the teeth are crooked, it's a sign that there's been compromise in other parts of the body as the body was created and built. So when the teeth are straight, it means that there's plenty of room in the head for these critical master organs in the head, the pituitary, the pineal, and the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus is the seat of impulse control. And what are we seeing in our children today? in the violence and the behavior problems. It's lack of impulse control. And when we think of the stolid Native American able to go through many privations without showing emotion and so forth, that's impulse control. That's a very good, strong hypothalamus. When the teeth are straight, it's a sign that there's been good development of the entire skeletal system, good musculature. You tend to see very good posture, keen eyesight and hearing. I have a little question now. How many people in this room need corrective lenses? How many people do not need corrective lenses? So about 10 to 15%. Now, if we collectively were a tribe having to depend on our hunting skills, we would not survive with only 15% with perfect eyesight. Optimal function of all the organs, so all the organs, the heart, the pancreas, the liver, the kidneys, etc., have been built properly and work at optimal function. And then the brain. The brain is a physical object, and there's a whole chemistry of behavior and feeling good. That depends on good nutrition. And Dr. Price found a very optimistic, cheerful people. And finally, when the head is broad, when the face is broad, the pelvic opening is round. And that is the ideal shape for a baby to get out. That's the shape that's going to give you the most surface area. When the teeth are crowded, there's compromised space in the head. The head is more narrow. There's not enough space for these organs may be compromised or squeezed. You tend to see poor development, poor posture. People are easily injured. Poor eyesight and hearing, compromised function of one or more of the organs. And then you start to see the depression, behavior problems, learning problems. That is a nutritional problem. And finally, the pelvic opening, instead of being round, is kind of squished. So it's oval. And that makes childbirth much more difficult. And we, I'm not critical of all these cesareans that are being done. Some of them may be unnecessary, but most of them are absolutely life-saving. And I think we don't realize what we're saying when we criticize the cesarean, because before that came along and before the modern methods of child delivery, childbirth in industrial cultures was life-threatening to women. One birth in 10 ended in a very, very agonizingly painful death of the mother. So we need to kind of put all this in perspective. Dr. Price went to the South Seas, where he made a point of going to isolated islands. This is my favorite page in his book. The beautiful facial structure and dental structure of these young men on an isolated South Sea island. And these are teenagers. These are teenage boys. Our teenagers don't look so happy, do they? Mm-hmm. These are women from the island. He noted that all the men look like brothers and all the women look like sisters, even if they were not related. That's because their diet brought out the optimal expression of their genetics. And this beautiful lady is 90 years old. We do not know the average lifespan of these primitive people, and of course that's one of the criticisms that we hear. Oh, but these people only lived to age 40. But there was not a lot of childhood death. These people knew how to have healthy babies. And there were plenty of elderly people. True, there were people who were killed through trauma. It was a dangerous life. But the elders tended to live apart. They had foods that were easy to gather and to process were reserved for the elders. So there are special elder foods, and the elders played very important roles in the culture as teachers and wise men, wise women and wise men. So looking at the diet of the South Seas, we now have a very different type of diet. This is the tropics. They had plenty of plant foods in the diet, fruits and vegetables. One of the most important fruits in the diet was the coconut. The coconut is actually a fruit. It's not a nut. Very high-fat fruit. They also had a starchy fruit, the taro root, which was prepared by fermentation. This is a theme we find worldwide, that the foods high in carbohydrates like grains and the taro root tended to be fermented.